Rachel, there's been something I need to tell you about going on that I need to tell you about urgently.
Okay, I'm here.
I've been going to different places like the the supermarket. And like the stores where other things can be purchased.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
Or like the line at the school where we pick up the children.
Yes.
And sometimes people are smiling at me.
Oh.
And it's freaking me out.
Yeah, I could see that.
To no end. It's discombobulating. I don't want people to smile at me. I think it means my death is approaching.
You might be right.
So I think on this week of Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, we should talk about the movie Smile.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
All right.
Okay.
I just have that kind of face people want to smile at.
It is a pretty cute face. I'm Rachel.
Oh, hi. I'm John.
Hi.
We are a married couple.
Yes, we are.
And I used to be Rachel's smile therapist. I'm not licensed or registered in any sort of way, but, you know, she reached out to me one day and said, I've been having this problem. And she came to me. It seemed pretty unbelievable, but we fell in love. And here we are, still smiling at each other 10 years plus.
Yeah, it's true. Very true. And especially when we talk about horror movies, which are our favorite kind of movies.
Absolutely. And like we mentioned in the intro, we're talking about the movie Smile today. If you're new here with Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, this is one of our deep dive episodes, which means we will be doing spoilers. We will be doing spoilers.
Yeah, we will.
There will be spoilers.
So many spoilers.
And so if you don't want this movie to be spoilt, if you haven't seen it yet, give this a quick pause, like a 2-hour pause. That should give you enough time to run off, go watch the movie, come back and rejoin us.
Also should give you time to piss yourself, change your pants, and then come back, because that's what this movie does.
Rachel doesn't like this movie.
I don't.
Because it's effective.
Because it's good at what it does. I hate it.
And is there do you have any content warning for this one?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of content warning for this movie. Suicide, self-harm, childhood trauma, parental abuse, and just mental health crises in general. This is a movie about a lot of dark shit. So if you haven't seen it and you're wondering if you should, if any of these things are really going to mess with you, then make sure you've got like a snuggly blanket or a warm cup of cocoa or someone to sit next to you and cover your eyes for you. Actually, I needed that at the end of this movie, didn't I?
Yeah.
Our child came in and sat with me, our teenager, to be fair. She loves this movie because she likes scary things, and she got a real kick about how scared I got.
Yeah, well, I don't think she loves it as much as you think. I think she was comforted by the fact that you were so scared by it, because she was very scared by this and the sequel. Lastly, I'm going to give a health warning.
Okay.
If you haven't yet listened to our vacation special, where we talked about a long list of vacation horror movies that you should check out.
Yes.
After our vacation, I've come down with a cold. It is still here, but it's easier for me to talk, but I'm getting a bit stuffed up, so I apologize in advance for some of my stuffy uppiness and the words that create with my foggy brain.
I love your foggy brain.
Foggy brain. So, do you recall when we first saw this? I'm assuming my first watch was with you, but I guess it's possible I watched it once ahead of time. Maybe I did. Maybe I watched it and then made you watch it.
I don't know about your first time watching it. I know my first time watching it. First time we watched it, this was the first movie we watched in 2023.
Whoa.
January 1st, 2023, Smile. And then we watched it again for this podcast.
Well, and 2023, I think, was a pretty good year. So maybe we should start each year with a terrifying film.
Oh my goodness. I think we watched Sisu was our first movie of 24. I don't know why I remember that. And then I don't know what our first movie of 25 was. I'd have to go back.
It was Critters.
Oh, I think you're right. Good call. Good call.
What about this year?
Ooh, I have that information.
This feels like a New Year's episode we could have done.
It does feel, well, hey, maybe this will be one we can deep dive on these movies when the new year comes. Superhost was our first movie of this year.
Mediocre.
January 1st, yeah.
The one I'm least likely to rewatch.
Solid 2.5 stars from me. So that's
very mid.
Very mid.
But hey, Barbara Crampton's in it.
She is, and that's a great way to start your year. If you can start your year with Barbara Crampton, it doesn't matter if the movie itself isn't great.
But Barbara Crampton's not in this movie, and I think as much as you'd like to resist and procrastinate, we should dig in to Smile, so hopefully we can watch the sequel soon.
No, you shut your face. That's not happening.
Wouldn't it be funny if we spin the sequel for the first time ever today, and the movie that pops up is Smile 2?
I will cry. We have never spun the sequel on our Wheel of Horror, which is how we pick our movies. And we have so many good sequels on the sequel. And if this is the one that comes up, I'm going to have to believe in demons.
It's a great sequel, but
why
don't you give me a summary of this original Smile?
Okay, so after witnessing a patient's violent suicide, psychiatrist Dr. Rose Cotter becomes the next link in a chain of deaths driven by a curse that feeds on trauma. Racing to find an escape, she discovers there may not be one.
Yeah, it's not a good situation to be in.
It is awful. She is super stuck. And don't forget, we're going to spoil the crap out of this, so buckle up.
And this movie was written and directed by Parker Finn, and it is based on a short film he wrote and directed called Laura Hasn't Slept, which came out in 2020, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of that in a bit. But Smile was released on September 30th, 2022 by Paramount Pictures with a runtime of 115 minutes, so just shy of that 2-hour mark. And in terms, I think a lot of horror movies are better when they're around the 90 to 100 minute area, but I think this movie requires that extra.
Doesn't feel like a 2-hour movie.
No.
It just does not.
And the budget for this film was approximately $17 million, and it made $217 million worldwide approximately. So that is a huge return on investment, and it was one of the biggest horror successes of 2022. In fact, it might have been, I think I saw in one place that it was the most successful horror movie of 2022, but that was only one place, so I'm not sure. And this movie originally was intended for streaming only. It was going to go straight to streaming.
I saw that.
And so it was going to be with Paramount Plus. Due to the strong test screenings and the audience response, Paramount was like, I think we've got a theatrical movie on our hands. And obviously by the box office return, they were right. I don't know if you remember this. I actually do remember some of the marketing. There was like a viral marketing campaign, and that certainly played a role in the massive interest in this film. A couple of examples of this is that actors were planted at Major League Baseball games, sitting behind home plate, staring into the camera and smiling like the people do in the movie. And I guess there was also one on the Today Show standing behind Al Roker, which I didn't have the time to dig that up, but that would be a funny clip to watch.
Yeah.
So the result of all of this was a viral spread, a strong curiosity in the movie, and, some aspect of the concept, at least sort of the horror that's involved in it, was kind of understood, that there's some sort of weird psychological undertone.
I know this is when we talk about reception, and I feel like Smile kind of came at the beginning, maybe not the beginning, and if I don't want to bring up elevated horror too early in the conversation, but it does seem we're in the post 2020, post pandemic era here, right? And so if films usually have a 1 or 2 year production cycle, that seems fair, right? Maybe longer, but on average, it is interesting. It seems like Smile was kind of at the beginning of this crazy resurgence that horror has had over the last few years, culminating in, of course, this year's Oscars, where now it's starting. Horror is now making up a lot of the percentage of the box office money around the world now. Like, horror is becoming more mainstream because the world is terrifying and horrible. And so we're all experiencing that through our art. But I wonder, Smile, I mean, a movie about trauma 2 years after COVID seems appropriate.
Yeah, especially, because that was, and like you're saying, I was going to ask you about this and you kind of already answered it. But from what we've seen, right, that whenever there's like a traumatic event, there's like a new resurgence in horror based on those reasons that you gave, that, when the world's more terrifying, people seem drawn to the horror genre, maybe to dissociate from the real horrors of the world to experience somebody else's horrors. And certainly a film that's not only about trauma, but sort of targeting trauma to come after something like COVID, where there was worldwide trauma, essentially.
Right. And COVID, and just like the trauma in Smile is experienced by folks who've already been traumatized, which we'll talk about, but people who were already vulnerable were even more vulnerable to being isolated, getting sick, that kind of thing. And I feel like the Trauma Monster also does more work on people who've already been traumatized. Interesting.
Trauma Mama.
Trauma Mama. Ugh, God.
Well, and in terms of critical reception, I'm going to say something I've rarely said on this show. Critical reception was generally positive.
Huh.
And in terms of some of the mixed to positive quotes, we have A.O. Scott from the New York Times. Ayo! Smile is an efficient, skillfully engineered fright machine. It knows how to get under your skin. Richard Lawson of Vanity Fair said, Smile may follow a familiar template, but it executes it with a surprising amount of confidence and control. While Katie Reif at Polygon said, I'm pronouncing words in strange ways. Polygon said what sets Smile apart is its commitment to unease. It lingers in a way that many studio horror films don't. And David Ehrlich at IndieWire said it's slick, it's scary, and it's anchored by a performance that sells the descent into madness.
Yeah, unease. That's a good way to talk about it.
When we get to sort of more of the mixed quotes, or some of the quotes that were more critical of the film, Peter Bradshaw at The Guardian called it a slick but derivative horror that borrows heavily from better films, though it's undeniably effective in moments. Owen Gleiberman of Variety said the movie works hard to unsettle you, but it sometimes leans too heavily on the mechanics of shock. I don't agree with that. And Brian Tellerico at RogerEbert.com. You were wondering who's writing the reviews at RogerEbert.com, and it sounds like Brian Tellerico is one of them. He said, there are genuinely creepy sequences here, but the film struggles to fully escape the shadow of its influences. And I think at some point we'll be talking about that, maybe in story time.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting take.
But to summarize it all, I thought this was a good quote from The Hollywood Reporter by David Rooney. He called it a well-crafted genre piece that knows exactly how to play its audience.
That's great. I like that a lot.
So basically, all of these are saying it's not reinventing the wheel necessarily, but executing at a very high level, which I think is fair. And in terms of, we'll talk about the derivativeness later on.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear. That's something that you're often very good at teasing out and seeing kind of those parallels. I tend to see themes and parallels with kind of the real world and philosophy and religion. And you're often really good at kind of pointing out some of those parallels between films. So yeah, great. That's Yeah, and I think that this having a good critical reception is in line with some of the other films that had good critical reception in the early 2020s, the early part of this decade, I can say now, in the latter half of the decade.
In terms of the horror landscape in 2022, which obviously is not that long ago, though 4 years ago already somehow, elevated horror was still prominent, but indie experimentation was also thriving, and franchises were sort of being requeled or rebooted or that sort of thing. And Smile fits well into this landscape because it's a high concept studio horror that bridges sort of mainstream type horror and psychological horror, which is not always what you see from the mainstream studios. And if you were going to go see some other horror movies in 2022, or if you were going to watch them on your favorite streaming services, you could have seen Barbarian, The Black Phone, Nope, X, Pearl, Halloween Ends, my favorite of that trilogy, come at me, Terrifier 2, Hellraiser, the remake, Bodies, 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 Watcher, Men, and the original Speak No Evil.
Oh.
Hell of a year for horror.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of those movies, most of them,
yeah,
right?
We've seen all of them except the Hellraiser remake.
I was going to say, the Hellraiser remake's the only one I'm not sure if I've seen.
And it's on our personal wheel right now, so
Ooh.
we could spin it at any time for one of our late night watches. But that's what I have sort of on the landscape and reception. What do you have on the ratings?
So ratings reflect what you said about generally positive reception. IMDb, it's a 6.5. Rotten Tomatoes, 79% tomato meter, 73% popcorn, which I think accurately is reflected in my own personal rating, which I'll get to. Letterboxd, 3.1, similarly. Personally, let me tell you my review before I tell you what I rated it on my 5-star. God, I hate this movie, but also it's real good. That's my review because I hate it so much. And I wanted to give it a 3.75. And I'm going to make a brief digression here to say that this movie actually has triggered a complete recalibration of my own personal rating system because this is not the first movie that I was stuck on between a 3.5 and a 4. But it needs to be between those. So I actually am currently in the process of re-ranking all 650 movies of mine because my lowest ranking before was a 1.5. And so I'm just going to bump everything down a little bit and I'm going to stretch out my 3s and my 3.5s. And I think so I'm landing on a 3.5, which is artistically, this movie deserves a higher score. Personally, I hate this movie. And so because I do tend to heavily weight towards my personal preferences in my ratings, this movie is going to receive a 3.5 from me. However, I understand that it's a better movie than that if we were trying to be more objective. Is that fair? Does that make sense? Also, I'm really excited to keep working on my rating project.
It sounds like a great use of your time.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this movie a lot. I do think it's effective in its scariness. My personal rating for it is a 7.5.
Yeah.
8 for me is, because my scale's on a scale of 1 to 10 with half digits, half integers.
Right.
But 8, I think, is sort of the line for me where things are like
real good.
Really, really good.
And that's what a 4 is for me, but I can't give this a 4. Because it's not there, which is why your 7.5 is perfect, which is why I said I want a 3.75. So I'm shifting my scale.
But I do think it's really close. Like,
yeah.
7.5 is a very high score. It's at the end of the year when I'm trying to figure out what my top 25 of 2025 is, I usually take all the 7.5s and above and work from there. So yeah. But what do you think about our recommendation scale for the listeners, which is a simple 3-tier system? Doesn't get you confused with Rachel's 5.5, 0.75. What is even that? Or my 10. You know what I'm saying. This is simple. 3 tiers. 1's trash. Don't even bother. 2 is the general mass of horror movies, especially if you're a horror fan, you should check it out. And 3 is genre changing or just absolute masterpiece level type stuff.
Yeah, this is a 2 for sure. A high 2 for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
high 2, 2+.
Yep, this is a high 2. You should watch it. It is scary as shit, and I will talk about more about that. But I think, again, extremely effective. And I am being slightly hyperbolic with how much I am saying I hate this movie. But I actually really had such a hard time watching it, and I don't want to watch it again, even though it's really, really good. Other movies make me feel this way, and I would watch them again. For some reason, this one is just too much. But that's it for distribution and reception.
Well, all that being said, should we make a movie?
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
All right, let's make a movie. Like I said before, in terms of key personnel, the person I really want to focus on at the moment is Parker Finn, our writer and director. He was born in 1987. He grew up in Bath, Ohio. And, he cites his father as one of the people earlier in his life that sort of turned him onto movies a bit. His father was a horror and sci-fi fan who was particularly interested in practical effects. And that's why he liked those genres. So this sparked a fascination with Mr. Finn with how horror visuals are made. And he would go on to attend Culver Military Academy, which was his college prep high school, and then later Chapman University. But I read a really good article that was published by Culver Military Academy about Parker Finn, because they're proud of him, as they should be, and maybe not like all of some of the other influential people that come from that school. I don't know anything about it really, but there was a teacher there at Culver Military Academy who had a Netflix DVD account at the time. As Rachel's mentioned before, when Netflix first came out, it was not streaming. In fact, you would make like a priority list of movies you wanted, and you, depending on what subscription level you'd have, you'd get 1, 2, 3 DVDs in the mail at a time. When you were finished with them, you'd send them back and they'd send you something new off your list. So this teacher was basically sourcing films for Finn Parker. And so
Parker Finn.
Yeah, I've started saying names like you would in like a roll call.
Okay. Finn Parker.
You should check that article out if you're interested. It's not very long. It's got a bunch of interesting stuff and just how some of his teachers and classmates remember him. Sounds like he was pretty quiet and, really only contributed when he had something to say, but he was well liked and everybody thought he was really creative. And obviously this is what turned out of it. In terms of his early career, he had a couple of shorts. The first was The Hide Behind, released in 2018, and then Laura Hasn't Slept, which was released in 2020. Laura Hasn't Slept is an 11-minute short starring Caitlin Stasey, who plays the character of Laura in Smile. She's the first client to visit Dr. Cotter, and who sort of triggers Cotter's whole situation. And I haven't had a chance to watch Laura Hasn't Slept yet, but I keep intending to. It's on my YouTube list. I think it's still on YouTube, and I wish I had watched it, honestly. So he put out this movie. He was pretty proud of it. He got it entered into South by Southwest in 2020, and it was selected for the South by Southwest Midnight Shorts series. And then the festival was canceled due to COVID. Like we mentioned before, 2020, the year of great.
The year of great.
However, even though they didn't actually hold the festival, and so people couldn't meet in person, obviously, for that type of event, the jury still reviewed it, and it won special jury recognition. And Finn said that while he was pleased with the film, he had no idea what would happen next. He said, "You never know how people are going to react to something until you go through the process of making it and finally showing it to them," he said. And after winning the special jury recognition, a link to Laura Hasn't Slept started being passed around Hollywood, like right afterwards. And Finn said that within a few days, it felt like everyone was watching it. Suddenly, there was an outpouring of people asking what I wanted to do next because it seemed to hook people in a particular way. So this quickly garnered industry attention, and Paramount reached out to Finn, or I don't know exactly how that process worked, but they hired Finn to expand his short into a feature-length film. And obviously, Smile was a big success. And so then he signed a first look deal with Paramount, which I think means that they get to look at his projects first or something.
I think so. That makes sense. That's what I would assume.
And he also founded his own production company called Bad Feeling Production Company. So overall, Parker Finn is a concept-first filmmaker with strong tone control who can create psychological horror but with a studio polish. And even when they thought it was going straight to streaming, they were really focused on making it a theatrical level release. And
that's pretty wild to think about being in that position. That's kind of like the dream, right? Of every artist or creator is to have that one moment, that one piece of art that catches the eye of those who can actually make the rest of your dreams come true. What a cool thing for him. I'm so happy for him.
Well, and it really is kind of like the old-fashioned artist's dream, right? Whether you're talking about musicians like us or actors or filmmakers or anything, right? You'd hope to get that big break.
Yeah.
And that was often how it worked. And I think it's a lot different than that now. It's like, how many followers do you have? And, that there's a lot more of that involved. So I think that, and maybe it's because of the strangeness of the COVID time that created maybe a space for him to sort of enter the industry in that way. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool.
In terms of production, it was in June 2020 when Paramount greenlit the project under the original title, Something's Wrong with Rose, which, kind of accompanies that title of Laura Hasn't Slept. I'm glad they changed it. Something's Wrong with Rose. A lot to say. Principal photography began in October of 2021 and went through November 2021 because the studio wanted it finished by Thanksgiving. So at the end of the day, the crew had 6 weeks to prepare. I can't say prepare, except when I'm saying I can't say it, then it's fine. And 31 days to shoot. And so obviously, like Parker Finn said, it's incredibly fast for a studio film. They really wanted a quick turnaround. In terms of where this was shot, it was shot entirely in New Jersey from what I've seen, including Jersey City, where many pivotal sequences were shot, Union County in northern New Jersey, where they utilized the Union County Jail in Elizabeth, New Jersey. They also shot outside the Arlington Diner in North Arlington. And besides that, the crew set up camp in and around Hoboken, which is right across the river from New York City. Back when I was a touring solo musician, I did a gig, I think it was called Stevens College. But I played in Hoboken right outside. It was like an outdoor stage. And I was staying in Newark, which was not close enough to Hoboken. And I had like a really early sound check. It was all a whole mess. The night before, I got lost because my hotel was right near the airport in Newark. And there was this big cement divider along the sort of the highway that it was on. And I went to the grocery store, I was trying to be responsible, save some money. And I couldn't get back to my hotel because of the cement divider. And I don't know if maybe now, because back then it was like printed MapQuest directions. This was like 2005. I couldn't get back over. I think it took like 2 hours. I think I ended up in Jersey City and I went into like a fried chicken fast food place. Smelled great in there. I'd already bought my groceries for dinner. Asking them how the hell I get back to my hotel. It was quite an ordeal. But I survived. Here to tell the tale of these people who didn't necessarily survive.
Yeah.
COVID did play a role in the production of this film as well. It was shot during the pandemic, which required, they had certain protocols in the industry at this point. Again, this was like later 2021, so kind of nearing the end of it all, but all the protocols were still in place. And even though there were no major documented issues due to these challenges, Finn did note that it added another layer of time spent and money spent and difficulty to the whole process, which stressed me out. He seemed like he got through it all right. But those extra demands on top of the fact that the studio wanted it shot in 31 days, I don't know. Seems pretty demanding. And maybe that's why they thought it was just going to be a streaming release, because I think they do try to push the production on those a bit more quickly. But what do I know? Overall, the production style incorporated strong pre-visualization and controlled execution. And basically, they planned all of their key shots in advance. They really knew when they started exactly what they were trying to capture.
Yeah, they would have to. It is a very meticulously put together film. Every shot seems very well thought out. And we'll talk about that more when we get to cinematography, I'm sure. But in terms of how cinematography affects production, the planning of that, or the lack of planning, depending on what film you're working on, must make such a huge difference. Not my area of specialty, but the more I learn about it and the more I learn about the process and that production part of a film, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I apologize.
You skipped me.
I skipped you.
You did. So now they get to listen to me talk for a whole bunch.
Well, not really, because you're going to do cast, and then we're going to jump into cinematography.
Right, exactly.
So it'll be fine.
Perfect. So as far as making a movie, we have the movie makers, the director, writer in this case, and now the cast, which is really talented and did a great job. We've got Sosie Bacon as Dr. Rose Cotter. She is indeed the daughter of Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, which is pretty great because she looks just like both of her parents, which not every child does, but I think she looks just like them. She made her screen debut at the age of 13 in her father's film, Loverboy, in 2005, and she played the young version of a character who was portrayed by her mother as an adult, which is a pretty cool way to get into cinema. Kevin Bacon has said he cast her as a director and not a father. You know, if she hadn't been his kid. Yeah. And the other stars
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. All right, Kevin Bacon. That's okay.
Keep those feet loose.
Yeah, he's fine.
Did I tell my Kevin Bacon story on this?
I think you've told your Kevin Bacon story before, but you've waited on Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, right?
Yes, they were very nice. And they seem like a very, very happy couple, which
is really nice.
And you can see that on Instagram, too. And they used to bring their daughter in, so that must have been her.
It must have been her. You've met her.
I didn't meet her. She wasn't with them the day that I served them directly.
Gotcha. But still, you have been in the same room with I think that might be the closest connection we have to any of the films we've covered so far. Maybe.
Yeah, there were several. And I know to a lot of people that's not a big deal, but I was a little Bangor Maine boy in the big city. So I'd still get starstruck, especially people like Kevin Bacon, who had quite a career by that point.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's cool. Her parentage notwithstanding, she has continued to work in the industry since that debut in 2005. She had recurring roles in Scream, the TV series on MTV, 13 Reasons Why, and she had a role in Mayor of Easttown, which is on my to-watch list, starring Kate Winslet. And in terms of films, she was in Charlie Says in 2018, and The Last Summer in 2019. But this was her first major lead, and she did a great job.
And don't they have a movie coming out, like The Whole Family?
They do, I think.
A horror movie.
A horror movie with the whole family, which is kind of cool.
It is called Family Movie.
Great.
And I think they've played it at some festivals, but I'm not sure when it's being released.
I've tried to avoid watching too much of it, but I've certainly seen some chatter about it on the socials. So I'm sure we will end up watching that. It's definitely in our wheelhouse. She has said that in terms of making this film, that the role was physically demanding, which I can only imagine. Like, she portrays someone breaking down really well. And she has described a particular day of shooting in her therapist's office, I think, where she actually broke down from all the emotional weight and exhaustion of playing this role. And she's spoken publicly about her mental health advocacy in the future after this film. So she did a really, really great job in this movie. And I can't imagine someone else in the role. We've got Kyle Gallner as Joel. I have seen him mostly in television, but he's also been in a ton of movies as well. But I personally have seen him more. But he was in The Haunting in Connecticut in 2009, Jennifer's Body in 2009, Nightmare on Elm Street remake. He was in Kevin Smith's Red State, which I think we should rewatch. Have you seen that?
I'm not sure I have.
I've seen it once and liked it more than I thought. And then, of course, he was in Scream in 2022. So 2022 was a big year for him.
What TV do you know him from more than all of that?
I first saw him. Oh, and he was also in Strange Darling, which we have watched.
Right. I really like Strange Darling.
I like Strange Darling a lot. He was in, it was a show about Appalachia, which was not I think
we've already debated how
we've talked about this. This is how I know Kyle Gallner is from that show, because he plays like a guy from an Appalachian family that's out in the woods, and he like falls in love with a city girl, and that causes big trouble for his whole clan. Anyway, that's where I know him from and feel so. Whenever I see him, I'm like, oh, it's that guy. But he's also in a million other things. Oh, he was also in Veronica Mars, which I think a lot of people know him from, and American Sniper. So yeah, he has done a lot of amazing things. Also plays Joel again in Smile 2. So we've got Jesse T. Usher as Trevor. We'll get to Trevor later, but Jesse Usher, I'm sure, is fine. He's known for Independence Day, Resurgence, and he's also in The Boys as A-Train, which is one of those shows that I feel like we should have watched, but just have not gotten to. A lot of people that we like are in that show. He was also in Tales of the Walking Dead. And
Tales of the Walking Dead?
Yep. That's what IMDb says, which
is something I know?
Limited series, looks like. It's an episodic anthology that will follow individual characters from the Walking Dead TV universe.
Is it like just an online show, maybe?
No. It says it was from 2022. I'm not sure if it was ever actually made or not. Parker Posey.
What?
Samantha Morton, Terry Crews, Olivia Munn.
This sounds made up.
It does sound made up. It's not unwatchable, nothing like that. Yeah, no, I think it was just a temporary, a limited series. 6 episodes, it looks like.
Anyway, we don't have time to talk about all that.
We sure don't. Let's talk about Robin Weigert as Dr. Madeline Northcott. She has been in a gajillion things. She was, I guess, well, according to what I was looking at, best known for her Emmy-nominated portrayal of Calamity Jane in Deadwood. I knew her from Sons of Anarchy. She was also in Big Little Lies, Concussion, and she is in a show that I'm watching right now. Oh, Chicago PD. I have to have a show that I don't have to pay too much attention to going on while I'm house cleaning or gardening. And so I've been watching Chicago Fire and Chicago PD and eventually all the other shows, but she's in that. And I saw her maybe a week after we watched Smile. She popped up and I was like, ha, because she does a great creepy job in this movie. One interesting bit of trivia about her father, Wolfgang Oskar Weigert, or Wolfgang Oskar Weigert, was a psychiatrist who emigrated from Berlin in 1938. So her dad was a real-life therapist, and she is playing a therapist in the movie. You already mentioned Caitlin Stacey as Laura Weaver. She's an Australian actress, has also been on the Australian TV series Neighbours and Please Like Me. Cal Penn as Dr. Morgan Desai, who plays Rose's supervisor. For those of us who grew up a long time ago, best known for Harold and Kumar, which is always weird to see him, but he's in serious roles, although, of course, that was just his earlier role. But House MD, he was also the associate director of the White House Office of Public Engagement under President Obama from 2009 to 2011.
Yeah, wasn't he a speechwriter?
Yeah. So he actually had a role in politics, so very serious, not like Harold and Kumar. Both those guys have done great. But I'm just always going to know them from that. Although I suppose if I watched more stuff with him in it, kind of like Sean William Scott has finally changed from being Stifler. We were just discussing that the other day because I've seen him in enough serious stuff now that I see him differently. Maybe Cal Penn would not remind me of Kumar as much. But And then only other person that I had on my list was Rob Morgan, who plays Robert Talley. He's the convicted murderer who survived the curse. He has been in a lot of shows, including Stranger Things.
What was he in Stranger Things?
He's one of the police officers.
Ah.
And isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
What's his face's dad? Yeah, you just watched all of Stranger Things. So I was surprised that you didn't put that together. But yes, very different character. He has a small but memorable role, of course, in this movie and plays it extremely well. So that's what we've got for cast. Really strong cast and that acted the shit out of this movie. But that's all I got. I think we're done making the movie.
Yeah, movie's made.
Movie's done.
We should probably check the vibe.
Let's check it.
Vibe check.
Here we go, we're checking the vibe. Sounding good and looking real nice. How'd they make that guy unalive? It's better off without CGI. Pacing on point and we're feeling fine. The slow burn is taking its time. Here we go, we're checking the vibe.
All right.
Howdy doody. I'm trying new things.
I love that about you.
Yep. Actually, I'm like the most like set into routine person ever.
Oh, man. But cinematography, nope. Yes, that's you. Go. Vibe check. I was like, no, we're at the vibes, which is cinematography.
You sound like you've lost your mind.
I sound like I've lost my mind.
If you could not yell into the microphone, be appreciated by all of us. If that wasn't loud on your end, people, that's because I minimized the spike in sound that destroyed, you know, in that, like in movies, when there's like an explosion and they do the fake ear ringing sound in movies, that's like most of the time.
I'm not going to apologize for my depth, my range of dynamics. My dynamic range is one of my strengths. I'm not going to apologize for it.
Cinematography. So I kind of dug into this a bit more than the past couple of episodes just because
there was more to dig into. It was a beautiful film.
Well, and it's interesting too because with a lot of newer, so sometimes with the old films, like say The Shining, we benefit from the fact that it has just had so much study done into it. And sometimes when we have newer movies, even if they're high quality, unless we have the time to like watch behind the scenes stuff and everything, it can be harder to find some of that information. But luckily I found some stuff on Charlie Sarroff, who is the cinematographer, director of photography. He is from Melbourne, Australia. Sorry.
That was good.
It was better than I ever imagined it would be. I cannot do an Australian accent for the life of me. And really, he's done a lot of indie projects and commercials and music videos and television. But before this movie, really, the only sort of feature that I came across that he did that was sort of, you know, had some distribution to it was Relic from 2020. And this movie's popped up for me on like AMC Plus a couple of times. It's made my wheel a couple of times, but I don't think I've actually watched it yet. But I'll definitely have to check it out. And then Smile in 2022, he was director of photography on a movie called Broke in 2023, which I think is like a neo-Western type film. The rest of these all look like horror films. Then he did Night Swim in 2024, which we haven't seen yet.
That's one of those that I was like, wait, I think no, we haven't, but we're close.
And then he was also tapped to resume his role as director of photography for Smile 2. And then he also has a movie coming up that he did the cinematography for called Saccharine. I think in our earlier episodes, I focused more on sort of the technical aspects of cinematography, which I've gotten away from a little bit just because sometimes the time it takes to look into all of that. And we're trying not to make 9-hour episodes here. But I thought it was interesting. I saw a podcast with him and the colorist of the film, which we don't talk a lot about coloring, but that's also a post-production thing that's very important to all films, especially in the modern age with digital and everything. And they did shoot this on digital on the Arri Alexa 65 camera. And, they really did take into consideration sort of what they were going for when they picked this camera, because it has a high-end digital look that is great in low light. It has clean clinical visuals, which is obvious in this movie. And also something I found interesting, I don't know if anybody else will find it interesting, I'm not sure I have the technical wherewithal to completely understand it, but this camera encodes in a way that allows for lossless compression, which is like a huge space saver in terms of digital files. Basically, it means that they can, once they've filmed scenes, they can compress those files without losing the quality of them, and makes for easier transfer, and they have to use way less like hard drives and stuff. So that was like a really positive selling point to like the studio as well, because I don't think that the Arri Alexa 65 is necessarily the cheapest camera to rent for filmmaking.
Do they rent films for filmmaking? They must.
Cameras?
Sorry, cameras. Yeah. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think so.
Huh. I never thought about that. Like, who owns the equipment?
And I don't know for sure, but maybe some studios own cameras that, I don't know. My understanding most of the time is that they pick what they want. If it's approved, they get it rented. But Sarroff noted that they wanted this camera because of its effectiveness in widescreen close-ups, which obviously there's a lot of those throughout the film, because a lot of different cameras will start to sort of distort the face, not in any way that the viewer immediately detects it, but just kind of sort of changes the shape of the face and that sort of thing. And they wanted to keep like a clear, precise image, I should say, of the person they were filming. So that was a big reason that they chose this camera as well. And Sarroff, in this interview, he said he didn't, he's not opposed to those other cameras that might create some of that distortion in close-ups and things like that. But specifically for this project, this is what they were going for. And I thought that was interesting because I get a sense, and maybe that's a generational thing or something. I get a sense that certain cinematographers have their style and they shoot their movies. They have like a pretty standard way that they shoot movies. And Sarroff seemed pretty open to really adapting to whatever project he was working on. And maybe that comes from all of his indie projects and the commercials and TVs. But overall, his style, at least for this film, incorporated a lot of slow push-ins and use of negative space. Rachel's favorite part of horror movies, the use of negative space.
It's funny because I never would phrase it like that, but you're right. That must be when you start watching me start to squirm over on my side of the couch, where I'm like, no, and my hands start to drift up to cover my face, and I start peeking through my fingers because I know something has come. Just thinking about it is stressing me out.
And there are those inversion shots, which I saw you make notes every time that happened.
Twisty camera angles.
They would sort of go from right side up to upside down.
Yeah.
And then they also, in this movie, lingered on shots a little bit longer than you typically would. Everything about this, and I'm about to get into this, was done with the intention of creating sort of this constant unease. And they certainly succeeded at that. And I think that was a big part of why this film was so successful, is there's very consistent tone throughout this film. And I think that's where some other films fall short, is maybe they don't have necessarily consistent tone. So that worked really well for this movie. And Sarroff, when he was talking about working with Parker Finn, he said that Finn likes camera movement, and they use plenty of camera movement, but is not afraid to lock the frame down when it will be more effective to have the camera completely still. And I can't remember what. Oh, it was when we were watching Wishmaster that there was some camera movement at times when like two people were talking, that it was every time it went to the cover of the other person speaking, the camera would be moving again. And I was like, that seems like a lot of extraneous camera movement. And I do think, you know, just like in any sort of art, there are people that tend to get nervous about certain things that might actually work. And so sometimes locking down that camera was really important. Like if you're thinking about Rose and Laura sitting in their chairs in the patient interview room, just sort of the medium shot of the two of them sitting there, just that locked in frame, they're sitting there, and then it goes to those close-ups that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, one of my notes about this was camera straight onto people's faces, noticing every time that happened, which you've now explained was obviously an intentional choice. But I don't, and it's hard to say because now I watch movies differently than I used to, but it's not always something like, I don't remember noticing that about Wishmaster, right? And I don't remember a lot about the cinematography from Wishmaster, but this movie, I was noticing the choices all over the place.
And it is very clinical feeling in this, which I think I know is very intentional in terms of the effect that they were looking for. The other thing that I found was interesting, and I'm not sure I would have looked into it as much if I hadn't seen that interview with Sarroff and the colorist, whose name I said earlier, and now I can't remember it.
That's okay.
But the color design was very intentional in this film as well.
I'm trying to see if I had any notes about that, but I know what you're talking about though. I think the only note I made specifically was about the blood on the sheet, like the red and the white.
I have nothing about red or white.
But maybe I did write something about Rose, and I'm not sure if that's under my characters or if it's not in cinematography. So,
well, one thing that I didn't notice watching it, and I'm sure I'll notice it next time, which is, always cool when there's more a good movie has multiple layers for you to discover. And I think
too bad I'm never going to watch this movie again.
I doubt it.
Shut up.
There was a yellow motif throughout the film. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, for example, back to that shot I was talking about with Rose and Laura sitting in the interview room, there's a little vase, I never say vase, in the table in between them with yellow flowers. I'm sure you'd know what kind of flowers they were, but
I think they were daffodils.
And there's sort of this use of yellow from time to time throughout the film. They don't hit you over the head with it in any sort of way, but the idea is for it to be not comforting when, at the surface level, it looks warm, especially compared to, there are certain aspects of this film that are very monochrome in a way. You have this pop of color that should feel warm, but instead it sort of feels artificial and uneasy, again, contributing to the discomfort that they're trying to create in the viewer. The other thing that I did notice when we were watching the halls of the hospital are that sort of weird pink color that they use like in drunk tanks and stuff like that. It's like psychologically supposed to calm down the people. So using it sort of in a psych ward makes sense. I'm not sure if they actually do that in hospitals, but that's part of why they did that. And again, going back to that interview room, the patient interview room, the walls in that room were like blue, but then they had the pink shades over the top of it. Like are they blinds or shades?
I don't remember.
They let light through them either way across the window, which this pink is supposed to comfort, but again, it's kind of artificial, and it creates the colorist was explaining why this combination actually creates unease in the viewer, because they're not exactly complementary colors, but they're close, which an analogy I can think of is if you are using two notes in a song that are very close to each other, that's usually going to create dissonance, right? The fact that they're close to each other doesn't. So the fact that these colors they were using were close to complementary colors, but not quite.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
So overall, it gives you a sense of like being off emotionally, sterile, but wrong. And So they really controlled discomfort through framing and color and camera movement. And it was really interesting, too, just to hear the colorists talking about, well, both of them were talking about how, they wanted that specific pink that's supposed to be the calming pink, but then trying to figure out how to make sure it would look like that in the end product. Because when you film something with the light and everything, it might not be the shade that you're looking for. So just so much to take into consideration.
Make sure you send me the links for those articles so people can check them out in the show notes.
Okay.
Please.
But that's all I've got for cinematography. Why don't you tell me about SFX?
I would love to. So, first of all, the creature special makeup effects credits go to Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. from Amalgamated Dynamics, Inc., or ADI. These two gentlemen are Stan Winston alumni. They co-founded ADI in 1988. This group or company had credits include the Alien franchise from Alien 3 onward, which I thought was really interesting. Death Becomes Her, where they won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, and Starship Troopers, which has some pretty great effects if I remember it from when I watched it decades ago. And Finn actually cited them as a primary reason why he wanted to make horror films. So how cool is that he got to work with them on this film that is his first major feature film.
And I did have that in my notes in case you didn't get to it, but I saved it for you.
Yes, thank you so much. They have parted ways, Gillis and Woodruff, since then. Gillis now operates Studio Gillis. And then the creature concept design for the creature at the end was by Vincent Proce. Proce? I don't know how you would...
Vincent Price?
Not quite. Finn has said that Proce is not well in the head, which is meant as a compliment. This is from an LA Weekly article. So that reminds me of, yes, that very much is a compliment. It reminds me of, I'm not sure if I've told the story of when I met Kurt Vonnegut in college.
I don't think so.
Maybe I haven't. Well, I got to meet Kurt Vonnegut when I was in college. He was a special professor at my school, my senior year of college, junior and senior year. I was an English major and found out that he held office hours on Friday afternoons. And so I quickly, when I discovered this, it was a Friday, quickly worked on a short story that I had written the previous semester in my old writing class and ran to the library and met him there. I'm not going to tell the full story, but I worked with him maybe 3 or 4 times. Kurt Vonnegut read my story, and the highest compliment I have ever received as an artist is Kurt Vonnegut told me I was as crazy as a bedbug after reading my writing. So not well in the head, definitely a compliment when you are into writing and creating weird and creepy stuff. So the Mother Monster special effects, let's talk about that. The practical effects in this movie are, obviously, we're practical effects fans. I think most people know that already if they've listened to anything we've ever said. The creature that appears as Rose's mother is a full practical suit performed by a person and shot running down miniature hallways to make it seem ginormous, which reading this afterwards blew my mind. So scale was achieved entirely in camera. It made me think about Lord of the Rings when it came out, and there were all of these really cool documentaries for those of us who were really into the Lord of the Rings back in college that we watched. I remember watching where they showed how they used perspective and in-camera tricks to make the hobbits appear small and changing the shape of the things around them. And so that was the first thing I thought of with this. There's also puppets involved. And so there was a quotation from Sarroff in this British cinematographer article. Parker pushes for practicals and wants to do things in camera, and that's really exciting as a DP. It's an exciting moment when you turn up to set and you see these creatures in a tent. So this made me like the movie a little bit more, the fact that everything was practical for the most part. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about this, all of the smiling faces were actors. There's no digital enhancement on any performance throughout the entire film. Every creepy smile was that actor creepily smiling. Love this, 100%. Like, that makes it even worse, which is why when you do the stupid smile, I want to punch you in the throat because it is terrifying. Yeah, I think that is one of the coolest things about this movie. And maybe it's why this is such a hard one for me, because the reason I don't like it is because it makes me feel so bad, but it makes me feel so bad because the filmmakers used all of the tools at their disposal to purposefully make me feel bad, which means they succeeded, which means it's a good movie, but I still hate the way it makes me feel. So I had one other thing. Yeah, all the creepy smiles were entirely performance-based, no digital augmentation. So like all of our favorite movies, this movie leans really heavily into practical effects. So that was I didn't have anything deeper. Did you have anything specific on effects or special effects?
Not really.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I would have imagined that more of the ending was digital. And I mean, I think still like the fire and stuff must be digital.
Right. I didn't write any notes down specifically about that, but I think some of it obviously had to be digital, but knowing that the monster was not blew my mind. I think that was the coolest part of this whole thing. Was finding out how much was practical, and the gore effects and the bodies and stuff like that. That doesn't surprise me that that's practical, especially given the team that was working on this film and everything else that they've done. But the monster especially, that was super impressive, and the smiles. The fact that the smiles, great acting, guys, great acting.
Well, before we wrap up this segment of our podcast, I'll talk a little bit about music and sound design.
Yes, please.
And I was not imagining going into the composer as much as I did.
I have notes on him too.
Because he had a really interesting background. His name is Cristobal Tapia de Ver, and he's a Chilean/Canadian composer. He was born in October 1973, a few weeks after the military coup in Chile. And his parents initially fled to Paris shortly after he was born. After the coup, he returned to Chile with his mother for a while, but life under Pinochet's dictatorship proved difficult. Tell me about it. So eventually, they became political refugees in Quebec. Tapia de Ver, is that how you would say it?
Tapia de Ver, yeah. De Ver is Dutch, I think, is a Dutch name.
Well, wouldn't you say it Spanish since he was
Cristobal Tapia de Ver, maybe.
He earned his master's degree in classical music, specializing in percussion, which I thought was interesting given sort of his style in his compositions. There's a lot of like texturized sort of percussive sounds that he uses.
Side note, one of the things I love about your guitar playing, which I've said many times before, is that you were originally first and foremost a percussionist. And I think that your guitar playing benefits from that because you use a lot of texture in your guitar playing, just like this guy.
Just like this guy, me and Cristobal. He had a pop band called 1 Ton that signed with Warner Music in 2001. The group won the Canadian Dance Music Award for their electro-pop single Super Sex World in 2003.
I didn't know that about him. I had other notes, but that's pretty cool. Did you listen to Super Sex World?
No, not yet.
Oh, boy.
I'm afraid to listen to it alone. And not only was he a part of that band, but he also produced the recording of that, which is pretty cool because that doesn't always happen. And then he went on to compose for shows and miniseries on BBC in the 2010s. And his work was very well received by critics. Just a couple of examples. He went on to compose the music for the Channel 4 conspiracy thriller Utopia, for which he won a Royal Television Society Craft and Design Award for Best Original Music in 2013. The judges stated his work blurred the lines between sound design and score, creating a soundtrack that the jury said felt like it was being played inside your head, which, you know, I think would describe the soundtrack for this movie, the score.
Yeah, 100%.
The score for this movie. And
did you mention The Girl with All the Gifts? Because he also scored that movie, and that's a movie that I really like.
Well, I was about to get to it.
Oh, sorry,
I was in 2013. That was 2016.
You seemed like you were about to move on to the next topic, and I wanted to make sure you hit that movie because I like that movie.
No, I was just trying to read these notes. He won some other awards for some other stuff between that and 2016 when he scored his first feature film, The Girl with All the Gifts, and which won some awards at international festivals. Was there something you'd like to say about that?
No, just that I like it a lot. You should go into it blind and enjoy it.
And then it sounds like that a track from this movie that he scored A track called Gifted was used by Paramount in 2017 for the trailer for the remake of Pet Sematary. And he also scored a Black Mirror episode called Black Museum, which was in season 4. Do you remember what episode that is?
What was it called?
Black Museum.
Black Museum. I don't.
We watched all of those. Actually, we've got one left of the newest season we haven't watched yet.
Oh, cool.
I'm waiting for Rachel to rewatch because it's that one that's like a sequel to an earlier episode.
Oh, yeah. I can do that. I'll add that to the list.
He won somewhere around 4 Primetime Emmys for his scoring of the HBO limited series The White Lotus, for which he did the first 3 seasons. So he's done pretty well. In terms of style, it's not traditional horror scoring, but works so well, especially for this type of film. He uses distorted tones, warped textures, metallic elements, harsh spikes. Some movies like The Music Guides You, it does that less sort of in this context, but it destabilizes you, which, you know, it's like everybody who was working on building this film, that was sort of the goal, and they kind of aligned all their elements to the success that they found.
Yeah, the combination of cinematography and sound design in this movie are inextricable for me. Like, that is one of the ways that it succeeds so well. The twisty camera angles plus sound, the diegetic versus non-diegetic, like, it just the whole thing. Yeah, this movie is vibes, so vibes.
And in terms of sound design, I don't have as much about that, but obviously there's a lot of background manipulation, sort of subtle ambient shifts, and like audio misdirection. The sounds don't always necessarily match the visuals. They use silence at times to build tension, which that always gets me in movies when everything's just like silent all of a sudden. I think over decades we get so used to like scary music really being used in the times when they want you to start to feel scared. But I feel like we're seeing more and more the use of silence at certain moments.
Yeah, that was really masterful.
And then there are some like aggressive spikes that are like harsher than typical jump scare spikes. And another thing that I think was really cool is when the monster or whatever, the trauma mama, has inhabited a character. So like when Rose is seeing somebody who's not really who they are, like the therapist, for example, when she figures it out, their voice starts to get that weird sound to it.
Yeah.
Sort of like almost a demonic sound.
Did you see the information about the instrument that was used for a lot of the score and some of those sound effects?
I did not.
It's called a daxophone. It is an obscure instrument invented by a German composer in the 80s. It's a thin plank of wood clamped at one end and played with a violin or a double bass bow. So it's kind of like playing on a saw. And so it creates all sorts of sounds that closely mimic human voices, groans, growls, and screams. It was special ordered from a luthier, and Tapia DeVere learned how to play it from YouTube and used it on the first day that it showed up, and it ended up making it in the finished film. So he used this otherworldly instrument, knowing that if I ever do watch this movie again, which is unlikely, but if I do, I would be listening specifically for the daxophone.
I wonder how we can get one of those. That would be cool.
I'm betting internet would be involved, but I think a luthier would be able to make you one, I suppose. But yeah, daxophone, just like it sounds.
I know lots of luthiers. Everybody's like, oh, dude, can you hook me up with one of your luthiers? And I'm like, gosh, which one?
Yeah, no, great. This movie is vibes, and the sound design, the cinematography, the special effects all work seamlessly. And I think this is a great example of how horror makes us feel and how that can really impact our opinion on a movie. Like, I hate it because of the vibes, which are great.
All right. Well, I think that's it for Vibe Check.
Cool. Let's get into story time. Let's talk about the characters in this movie. So let's start with Rose. Rose is someone who uses her profession as a form of penance. So Rose experienced being the child of someone who was severely mentally ill, who witnessed death by suicide, and Rose did not call for help when she could have potentially helped her mother. So when I was in seminary, I was student pastor at a church, and I noticed that there were a lot of pastors and a lot of people in helping professions who had a lot of their own trauma and their own trouble in life. And I remember asking my supervising pastor, why are there so many people who have trauma in their past who end up in these helping professions, whether that be social work or pastoral care or therapy? And he said to me that they are revisiting the scene of the accident, trying to change the outcome over and over again. It was a seminal point in my development as a pastor and as a caretaker that and I recognize that, and frankly recognize that in myself as well, right? And so watching Rose treat people who have been traumatized really brought that story back to me, that they were revisiting the scene of the accident. And so Rose is revisiting the scene of her own accident, trying to change the outcome over and over, while her sister has completely, and we'll talk about her sister, but her sister's done the opposite. She's kind of created this whole little world for herself. Rose is instead kind of bathing in it over and over again and ignoring the signs of trauma in her own life. I think I wrote down at one point, physician, heal thyself. She is so unaware as a psychiatrist. She does not recognize her own signs of kind of crumbling and breaking. She does not recognize the fractures in her relationship with fucking Trevor. She is a caretaker, but who doesn't take care of herself, which again, very, very common, but a recipe for burnout. And it's something that is now looked at as people are being trained in these helping professions. The concept of self-care for people who care for others, really important. When Rose asks the entity, I can't remember, I wrote down, when the entity tells her, your mind is so inviting. That moment, Rose's mind is inviting to the entity because of this combination, this layering of trauma. Her pre-existing trauma made her a preferred host, and she's also, psychologically fractured, unclear about whether it's because of her prior trauma or whether it's because she just happened to be in the room. Either way, Rose is such a haunting character. When she tries to kill Carl in her hallucination, she's like choosing him because he has such a miserable life, right? And she frames that as compassion, which is wild for someone who has been caring for people who are mentally unwell. And then the other moment that I wrote down that really struck me, I was 10 years old and you were a monster, when she's speaking to the mother monster. That moment is so painful and poignant, and it rips open Rose's character. Rose is incredibly complex as a character, and I appreciate that a lot. Trauma, I took a course on trauma when I was in seminary, and Rose exemplifies how trauma never really heals. It can heal over, but the wound is always kind of there, and I think Rose exemplifies that as a character. And she continually, watching her is really hard to do. I don't know if those are, I had a lot of moments with Rose that I wrote down, and I don't know if you have anything to say about her as a character or how she moves in the world.
I was going to say something, but it may have slipped my mind. Maybe it'll come back to me. What was I going to say? Well, one thing that's really interesting is that things start to turn for her pretty quickly.
Yes.
But then it's still gradual, which I think is a pretty complex thing to pull off, whether we're talking about the character or the actor themselves.
Yeah, agreed.
Because things do, as soon as she's witnessed Laura's suicide, it doesn't take long in the movie before things really are obvious to the viewers that things are messed up.
Yeah, there is a quick, and the inciting incident is immediate in this movie, which is unusual. And yet it lasts for 2 hours. The pacing, especially for a first feature film, is really impressive. And a lot of that comes from Rose, who we spend this whole movie with her. One thing that I had written down in the cinematography part that I didn't mention, but I think it's important. It's important for Rose's character that Sarroff and Finn designed a specific rule. There were no over-the-shoulder shots for Rose, that she's never visually connected to another person in the frame. Rose is isolated, both in terms of her character, her relationship. She's fractured from her sister. She and Trevor have like no connection, right? The only person she's connected to is Joel. And even when they're sitting together on the couch, she is in focus and Joel is like slightly out of focus. It's such a great example. I'm not raising my rating here, by the way. I'm just saying I might be talking myself into maybe appreciating this a little more. It's because it's so good at making me feel so lousy. But yeah, Rose is isolated narratively, visually, in all of the ways. She is a tragic character. And that is brought home in the ending to the film where she thinks she's won and then she hasn't, right? The inevitability and the hopelessness, the bleakness of this film just kills you. Speaking of Joel, he is definitely a side character. He's the only person who believes Rose, but he's not a hero. He tries to be, but if he had just stayed away, then Rose might have succeeded if she had managed to die by suicide before someone else was there to witness, although I don't know if the entity would have allowed her to do that. Joel is her tether to reality, and then he also is the link to the next film. He's the next host for the creature. It ends on Rose's face, and then Joel is the new host for the entity. We don't know a lot about Joel and Rose's relationship. We just kind of get we can tell that they had a relationship, that Rose broke it off probably because she got too close to him and she can't get too close to anybody. He's a very sympathetic character. He definitely goes above and beyond for Rose when she shows up. She's like, use your police magic to find information for me. And he's like, okay. Joel probably has a background of his own if he's this drawn to Rose, who is clearly a person with a lot of issues. Let's talk about Trevor next. I hate Trevor. Such a jerk.
And what I just looked up after you said it, I just looked up Candyman.
Huh.
And the guy you hate in that movie was also named Trevor.
That's true.
He's worse.
That's right. Saying fuck Trevor felt very comfortable and reminiscent. Yeah, Trevor in Candyman is worse than this Trevor. But seriously, I think one of my first notes about Trevor says, how can I help? But he doesn't give the ride or die energy that Joel gives, right? Like he's like, how can I help? But then he's so uncomfortable with Rose's distress. And Rose, because she was a codependent child of a mentally ill parent, knows how to kind of fit herself into making other people comfortable. Like that's what she specializes in psychologically. And so Trevor doesn't want to help her. She tries to tell him the truth. And like, yeah, if your girlfriend's like, I think there's a ghost, or I think there's a demon or a curse, like even if he did think that she was schizophrenic and was starting to split, the way that he answers her with like disgust and disdain on his face is the last thing that you would want a loving partner to do if you started to lose touch with reality. And especially as the partner of a psychiatrist, you think that Trevor would be a little more with it and would be, I don't know. I
think there's plenty of people, when they start dating a psychiatrist, they think that this person has got it all together. Right. I suppose so. And I guess that's part of what working in helping professions has taught me, is that that's not the case. And there's also the mental health history with her mother that I think worries him. But you're right that he deals with it very poorly. Not very supportive. Not very supportive.
And of course, this is a choice that is made by, I can hate the character, but he was written that way. It's not his fault.
And their relationship is an interesting point, too, that I think makes that dynamic be able to exist the way that it does in this movie, is that they're engaged, right? But they're not married.
Right. So he hasn't quite committed to her all the way. And so she needs to continue performing whatever it is that he is expecting in order for him, which is not what marriage should be. Marriage should not be contingent upon you performing in a certain way. Like marriage should be marriage and commitment, partnership What you're looking for is someone who will be there for you, even if you fall apart, even if the demon and the curse wasn't real and she was having a mental psychological breakdown, he reacted super poorly. Like, I hope that if I ever split from reality, you would do better than Trevor. I think you would. I know you would. And I hope that I would for you as well. Trevor seems very immature and inexperienced, I guess. He doesn't know how to respond. His support is conditional on her not causing too many problems. And that is really shitty and not what you want in a relationship. I think that Rose's sister, Holly, actually does a little bit better than Trevor. But as I alluded to briefly before, Holly has responded to the trauma of their childhood by running away, by creating this perfect little life that she micromanages all around. I wrote Holly, supermom to Jackson. The dynamic between the sisters is layered with resentment and grief. Holly is the one who kind of escaped and built the normal life and left her sister behind. But now she's watching her sister turn into their mother, which is part of what happens in families that are marked by trauma and tragedy and addiction and mental illness, that very often one or both children will fall prey to that. Holly's fear about Rose becoming their mother means that she's also unavailable and leaves Rose alone and abandons her. And oh God, that moment when the creature looking like Holly comes to the car and flip. I hate it.
Get into that.
Jesus Christ. You've got Greg, Holly's husband, who, you know everything you need to know about Greg when he says, why become a doctor if you're not going to become disgustingly rich? Fucking asshole. He is the money and status worldview, right? Like the point is not to help people. The point of being a doctor is to have money and to make your life better.
Reminds me of a conversation I had with somebody that you know when we first started dating. But anyway, that might be divulging too much about myself.
Oh, I know. It took me a second to remember what you were talking about. But yes, there are professions that people think are just for making money, and yet you can also help people in those professions. And so I think that, yeah, Rose went into medicine to help people, and Greg is of a mind, well, no, make your money, and then you can help people afterwards. That's funny. We've got Dr. Madeline Northcott, Rose's therapist, who we've talked about a little bit. She has identified the source of Rose's initial wound, the guilt, the grief, the pain, but she clearly obviously thinks this is psychological and not supernatural. She's a fine therapist. She is gentle with Rose. She doesn't call her crazy, but she points out that Rose is experiencing some things. Madeline does everything right, honestly, I think, as a therapist, and it's too bad that Rose is actually under a curse because Madeline can't help her. And so her insight is not helpful because she's trying to solve for the wrong problem. I'll talk a little more about that in themes, psychological and supernatural, right? This is not the first movie to address those things and compare them and kind of question them. But yeah, Madeline kind of represents, what is it when you have the right diagnosis for the wrong problem, right? Like what does that look like? Few other characters that move us along. We've got Carl. He's the one who keeps repeating, "You're going to die." He gives us one of our first creepy smiles, right? Right after Rose kind of walks out. There's a lot of people have speculated, are people who are schizophrenic, are they actually seeing the supernatural? Carl represents this for us as Rose kind of moves from one end of the spectrum to the other. Carl represents this. And then she, of course, tries to kill Carl in her hallucination, which is a great scene. Two more important characters that we can touch on briefly. Laura Weaver, the one who transmits the curse to Rose. Her introductory scene is amazing, brilliant. She was a grad student who saw her professor die in front of her. I wish we had a chance to watch the short film. I will watch that with you, although I hear it has a jump scare. So, and then Robert Talley, the man who's in jail for murder, he found the way out by killing somebody, transferring the curse. I don't think that he gets portrayed as a bad person, which I think is really important. I think that he is portrayed as someone terrified. And when he realizes that Rose is the one who has it, his fear and terror is so real. And also, man, like jail better than being killed and tortured by this entity? I think for Robert it is. And I think he represents, our thought about that, because this movie makes you wonder, how would I get out? How would I escape? And Robert shows us the only way. So yeah, that's our cast of characters in this horribly depressing, bleak film.
So that means it's time for Murder Mayhem.
Murder Mayhem.
There's really no murder, plenty of mayhem.
Yeah.
And really, we don't see that many deaths on screen in this movie either. We hear about a long chain of deaths.
Right. Unless you count them as murders by the entity.
Sure.
Sure.
And just real quickly, in terms of the core structure, which is set up early in the film, the curse is passed through a witness suicide, and it seems like it targets people with a trauma-filled background to some extent, right?
Yeah, that's implied, but it's not affirmed.
And then the victim experiences hallucinations, increasing paranoia, reality distortion, and ends with them dying by suicide in front of someone else that then passes that on to start the chain again. And really, this movie's, focused really on one link in that chain. Really, the opening scene, as you mentioned, is when Laura comes into Rose's office. She's at the sort of the last stages of this pattern, and she comes in, she's frantic. She can't get anybody to believe her, including Rose, because Rose is trying to diagnose her. I don't look down upon Rose for that approach. I can't come up with vocabulary words again, but I don't discredit her for that. I think that she was approaching it the way she was taught to approach it. And just unfortunately, in this circumstance, Laura really needed someone to believe her, though I'm not sure it would have made any difference at this point.
Probably not.
And she came in, she was super frantic, and then all of a sudden she was calm and smiling, and then performs a very violent suicide in front of Rose. And this sort of establishes sort of the rules, the tone, and also the inevitability of this pattern, sort of what can be expected in the last stages especially. Some of these are scenes and some of them are more sort of like segments of the film, because that was the easier way to do that for this. Next really was the hospital scene with Carl, where, Rose walks by his room. At this point, she's starting to become untethered from reality a bit, but still early on. The patient appears conscious and threatening. And when she freaks out and calls in all the help, he's just revealed to be asleep on the bed, which shows us that all of a sudden her perception does not equal reality at this point necessarily.
Terrifying.
And then this always happens a bit earlier in the movie than I expect, is the birthday party.
Yeah.
Jackson's birthday party, her nephew's birthday party, which she's able to go to because originally she wasn't going to be able to attend because she had to work, which was that whole discussion with her brother-in-law, Greg, who thought, why are you even in this if you're not making tons of money? But Dr. Morgan there gave her the time off, basically forced her to take paid leave based on sort of her symptoms that she was exhibiting following Laura's suicide. He was a bit concerned for her well-being. And so she shows up at the birthday party. We saw her looking at, I think, like a train set is what Holly suggested she get for Jackson or something like that. We see her picking it out. We see her wrapping the present. We also notice that the cat, I don't have the cat's name here.
Mustache, thank
you, is missing, has been missing, and not showing up for food, but we don't necessarily link those together. I definitely didn't.
Not the first time through at all.
And, well, time for Jackson to open his presents in front of all the friends and family. And poor dead Mustache is in the box that Rose has brought to her nephew's birthday party, which, this signifies her, social collapse, humiliation, and further emotional breakdown. I mean, the fact that her sister even talks to her again after this is sort of impressive.
Yep. Maybe I hate this movie because it touches a lot of points for me. I'm not sure what any of my sisters would do if I gave their children a dead cat.
Only one way to find out. So a bit later, she returns to, and if I miss anything key, let me know. But
yeah.
She shows up at her sister's house to make amends a bit. And
did you talk about how she fell through the glass table?
Oh, well, yeah, that was
That's part of the mayhem. Yeah.
the birthday party. She gets all cut up, and now it looks like she's trying to kill herself doing it because she has.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even make that connection. She's got slices all up and down her arms.
Yeah, and her wrists are wrapped.
Yep.
So she returns to Holly's house at one point to kind of talk to her. Obvious tension between them for a good reason, probably. Yeah. And as Rose leaves, gets in her car, they haven't really come to any sort of resolution, right?
Right.
Rose gets in her car, and we see where we're sort of sitting in the passenger seat, and we see Holly coming out of the house. Holly approaches the car, and then all of a sudden, Holly's head like turns upside down, flips down in front of the driver's side window very suddenly with a big sting. It is quite unsettling and scary.
Yep. And you see her nephew watching from the window as his aunt just screams and like freaks out in the car, which again echoes that trauma cycle in families, right?
And also the disconnect from reality.
Yes.
What she's experiencing is not what's necessarily happening in the real world.
Exactly.
And so obviously this is one of the film's most iconic scares, and it's certainly more of a pure physical shock moment that works so well. It's so unexpected. I remember the first time watching it with our teenage daughter, and I wasn't thinking about it. And then when I saw her coming out of the house, I was like, oh, here we go.
Oh, man.
And then a bit later on, Rose encounters her therapist at her house.
Oh, yeah, man.
Well, first when Trevor's there and she leaves, but there's another time when she's at the house, the therapist shows up. The therapist is acting sort of weird, but acting concerned, rightfully so. And all of a sudden, Rose's phone rings, and it's the therapist on the phone apologizing for showing up previously without sort of checking in first. And then so everybody, Rose and the audience alike, realize that this therapist is not the therapist and is instead the trauma mama. I'm adopting that henceforth, trademark. And that's also a very scary scene, yeah?
Yeah, I think that the therapist's smile is one of the scariest for me in the movie.
She starts walking directly at Rose. Rose like falls back over the couch, and the therapist just walks over
the couch and comes up to her and is like drooling, which funnily enough, I did not know before doing research, but of course the team did special effects for Alien, and that scene very much like Alien, right?
Yeah, with the xenomorph in Sigourney Weaver's face.
Yes, so much like that. Really, really terrifying. And the demon, even when it's in other humans, the entity has an almost insectile or alien-like presence.
Inhuman.
Yeah, inhuman. Exactly. Oh, that scene.
So this person in Rose's life, who is supposed to be a trusted figure of safety, she can't even trust that anymore.
Which is how the entity destroys her bit by bit.
So somewhere in all of here, there's sort of more of a segment where Rose starts doing her research with Joel, and they discover sort of the pattern that we talked about before. So, and they also realize there's what's the guy in the jail's name? Sorry.
Oh, Robert?
Yeah. They discover that Robert's is the only person who's sort of survived this chain. And so they go to the jail to talk to him so Rose can figure out if he can help her in any way. And so they discover the consistent pattern of deaths, that each victim had trauma, escalating symptoms, and a witness present at the death. So this is where the curse kind of becomes defined and real, and it's not just a psychological breakdown. You could certainly wonder up to this point, even as an audience member, even seeing what you're seeing, whether or not, we've had other movies like this, like Candyman.
Yeah.
I've never really tied this movie to Candyman, and it's certainly very different. But
similarly, where you're like, is it a psychological break or is it supernatural?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things continue to escalate. Her hallucinations and paranoia are increasing more and more. Her loss of control becomes a sustained psychological pressure on Rose, which leads her to the hospital. She's now talked to Robert. She's decided in her head she's maybe going to kill somebody in front of somebody else in order to save herself, right? She's discovered this is the only way, that instead of killing yourself in front of somebody to pass on the curse, the only way that you can actually survive it is to kill somebody in front of a witness. So she goes to her place of work where she's supposed to have this paid leave. And we're seeing her, people are like, why are you here? She's like, I just got to grab something from my office. She has a knife up her sleeve and she confronts Carl and she attacks. She kills him real good. And Dr. Morgan walks in, right? He's the witness for that.
Yes.
All of a sudden, she comes to in her car. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't he rip his face off?
Dr. Morgan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that's what brings her to consciousness.
That's what makes her realize it's a hallucination because he peels his face off in a very non-realistic way.
And so all of a sudden, she's just in her car. That was all in her imagination. Of course, Dr. Morgan shows up at her car, sees the knife, and tries to stop her from leaving. But she leaves,
And we're all super hyper vigilant that he's going to do the head twisty thing. I'm now hyper vigilant every time she's in a car, right?
But up to this point, Rose is trying to fight the curse logically. And this moment shows that she's lost complete control of reality. And I think the second movie really has a lot more of that. And I don't think that spoils anything, but the tether to reality is really unclear.
Yeah. Agreed.
So she drives away. Dr. Morgan can't stop her. She goes out to her family's old home that they still own. It's dilapidated.
Even though her sister wants to sell it, she's held on to it.
It's in this final confrontation because she basically is like, I'm going to get away from everybody else. If there can't be a witness, I can't pass this on. Though it does seem like maybe it would just revert back somehow to someone. I think maybe to Robert. I don't know.
If she had succeeded,
I might be confusing it with one of the movies that it's kind of like. But she has a final confrontation with the monster. The entity reveals its true form. It is grotesque. It is human-like, but certainly not human. It expands way beyond the smiling person concept. It is now a real flesh and blood, or what resembles flesh and blood monster.
Yeah, we're still in Rose's mind, though.
Yeah, well, and right, because she catches it on fire, which burns down the cabin.
Yep.
And then it goes to, because then she goes to get comfort from Joel. Like, it's all over. I fixed it. Problem solved. And then Joel starts being a creepy creep.
Yep. And then she realizes.
And then she comes to and she's outside the cabin, which is not burned down.
So bleak.
So she re-enters the cabin. At this point, Joel shows up to try to save her or to stop her or fix the situation somehow. I'm not sure what his end game is.
Come on, Joel.
And of course, she self-immolates. Is that what it's called?
Self-immolates, yeah. And I wonder if Joel showing up like that is kind of what can happen in these relationships with trauma is like you watch somebody, you're trying to stop them from doing it, but you can't, and it ends up traumatizing you in response.
And this confirms that the cycle is unbroken and basically it's inevitable. So like you kind of mentioned earlier, I'm not sure it would have let her. I don't think it would have let her just kill herself. Without a witness. It
would just make her hallucinate that she was doing it and then she would wake up. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that pretty much covers Murder Mayhem.
Yeah, man. Fucking bleak.
Small body count, but a lot of terror, that's for sure.
Yeah, so much terror. So much terror.
And before you get into themes real quick, I just wanted to talk. This is where I kind of put in the part about what people complain it's derivative of. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that comes to people's minds is It Follows, which is a similar curse that's passed from person to person. I don't want to spoil anything. It's on our wheel. It's on our wheel of horror. So
yeah,
it's potential we could spin it today for our next episode.
Oh, that would be crazy to watch them two back to back.
And I love It Follows. Another one that I actually didn't see come up that much, but I think both of these are similar to The Ring.
Yes. The Ring was one of Finn's things that he gave as an inspiration to the cinematographer, right?
Which would make sense age-wise, too.
The Ring, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby were three of his, which is funny because Rosemary's Baby also builds tension.
And that's another one where don't know if it's
Yes.
psychological.
Oh, I didn't even put that together. Really interesting.
We're really breaking this down.
Yeah.
I think it's partially true that, I mean, it's certainly like It Follows, but if you want to talk about like slasher movies, I mean, how many of those are 100% original? Pretty much none of them.
Well, but it's because all of these are dealing with the similar themes and fears and deep terror that lies in the heart of man. Like this is what horror deals with. Of course, they're all going to seem derivative if they're all dealing with the same themes.
And to me, hit me up in the comments if you've got some other examples of sort of this curse that's passed from person to person, because I do like the concept and I enjoy all of these movies. So I would certainly be happy to watch more of them. But I think this movie really plays even more on the psychological aspect of things than, say, It Follows or The Ring. Like, I think that is really a big part of it.
I mean, all of our monster movies are contagious to a certain extent. Vampires, werewolves, zombies.
Oh my.
That moves us really smoothly into themes because the first one is trauma as contagion or the curse as inheritance. And so all other horror movies aside, this particular entity, the trauma mama, the transmission mechanics are a literalized model of how trauma spreads. And this is how you can, you have a lot of people in our generation healing generational trauma. This is how generational trauma happens. You can't catch it unless you witness something that traumatizes you. And that trauma is then something that that happens in relationship, and it's relational. It moves person to person through witnessed violence. It's an epidemiological model, it's like a disease model kind of. So this entity feeds on trauma, and people with pre-existing trauma, the reason that I kind of assumed that you had to have seen trauma in order for it to grab onto you is because of what Laura says in the opening scene. She says that, I saw my grandfather die. So she had seen death already. And then that everybody who I think got it had some sort of connection with trauma. And so, which makes sense because if you have had one traumatic experience, you are more likely to have more traumatic experiences. When people are being evaluated for PTSD, for example, the number of adverse childhood experiences you've had, the more open you are to it. And very often, if you don't heal from trauma, you then seek out situations, you seek out the scene of the accident again to try and fix it. But if you don't do the work and go to therapy and do EMDR, great treatment that's worked for a lot of people. But if you don't process the trauma, you end up reactivating it and seeking it out again, trying to change it over and over again.
I think Robert says that as well when he's telling her how he was able to avoid it, because when she's talking to him, she phrases it as if it's happening to somebody she knows.
One of her
first.
patients, yeah.
And I think he said, you kill somebody in front of a witness, the more trauma, the better.
Right.
So
that the more, yeah. So this entity, this film is fundamentally about how trauma is spread and how it is inevitable and how it impacts every part of your life. There's a good chance Rose's sister could have become infected if she had been the one to witness Rose's death, right? Because she also had a traumatic childhood, although she was far away from it. It was Joel, the cop, who has certainly witnessed plenty of trauma, who then became infected. So yeah, intergenerational trauma is the foundational framework for this, the biggest obvious theme. Another one we've already mentioned a little bit, mental illness as possession. This is something that we've seen in many films and books. There are people who posit that, in the Bible, it says Jesus healed someone of their demons. People have said, oh, well, they were just schizophrenic. They had something else. There's also people who say that in and I don't know a ton about this, but in tribal cultures or, pre-civilization cultures, that people would have schizophrenic breaks. They would be healed by the spiritual healer of the tribe, and they would be fine and go on to live their lives. So this parallel between possession, supernatural versus mental illness is a really interesting one, not just in film, but explored in the wider culture as well. The film, as you mentioned, it is, I think it's very clear at the end that this is supernatural, but right up until the end, you could say it's just Rose having this series of hallucinations and then killing herself, right? The symptoms of the curse are indistinguishable from acute onset paranoia and psychosis. And so they, and then the question is, well, is everybody who's been diagnosed with acute, like Carl represents this, right? Carl can see it somehow. Is he seeing demons and entities, or is he crazy and psychotic? Another scary part of this, other than all of the unsettling stuff we've already talked about, is that if this were happening to you, you couldn't prove that it was. And this has come up in a few of the movies we've had recently, but like if you can't convince people, everybody thinks you're crazy. This happened in Candyman, as you brought up. If people think you're crazy, but you're actually experiencing something supernatural, there's no way to prove it, and you're going to the nut house where you're not going to be able to get away. This creates a real genuine discomfort. Nobody believes her because she sounds mentally ill. This is an accurate portrayal of what happens when somebody has a psychotic break in their lives. This is what happens. They are rejected and everyone seems very uncomfortable with it. And people kind of, Trevor represents that. People who are not sure what to do with trauma or with mental illness. And so we have those representations. Rose has clinical language to talk about what's happening to her, and yet she cannot convince the people around her that it's not happening to her. I do think the film makes it very clear that it's supernatural in the end, but it is questionable right up until the end. So, other themes, which we've talked about, because this film is so beautifully blended, because the narrative and the cinematography and the sound design, everything, and the acting, all of it blends together. We've actually touched on most of these already, but caretaker burnout, the way that Rose works without sleeping or eating, she doesn't call on her own therapist. She became a therapist to avoid the trauma or to repair the trauma of her youth. Revisiting the scene of the accident, she is kind of the model for caretaker burnout. Nobody in her life shows up for her the way she needs them to in this moment. She is failed repeatedly by the system and by the people in her lives. And this also shows about how lonely it can be to never fully be vulnerable to anybody. Rose ran away from Joel, the one person who really, really cared for her and kind of showed up for her. And in the end, ended up hurting him even worse. So I did have some notes about elevated horror, because this, I think, does fit into that. And we've talked a little bit about that. I guess that label, there was an article on Horror Obsessive that I read that I thought had some good stuff on this. But the label emerged in the early 2010s in the wake of The Witch, the Ari Aster, Jordan Peele movies. The problem, of course, being that elevated horror implies that other horror is low horror and that this is horror that people feel okay with watching. Speaking of Jordan Peele, he and John Carpenter have both rejected that label. I think one of the useful definitions that I have seen is that it's horror that invites multiple readings. So this film invites you to read it as a meditation on trauma, intergenerational trauma, mental illness, but it also is just a scary story. The story that Kurt Vonnegut told me I was crazy as a bedbug for writing was a story about demonic possession. And I was so pissed off at the people in my college writing class who asked me, is the demonic possession representative of her drug addiction? And I was like, no, it's a demon. And I was super pissed off at them. But what's funny is that's, I think, what makes something that a lot of the elevated horror, that stuff that we call elevated horror, does that. It offers multiple readings. So, but then again, there's themes in Halloween and there's themes in all the, raunchy slashers that we really like too. So I don't know. I think Smile could be considered elevated horror, but it's also real down and dirty real fast, as we talked about. And I don't know. I guess the end question about elevated horror versus not is the label useful? Does it help? Is it something that you could recommend to somebody who wouldn't normally watch horror? Is it a gateway to watching horror for someone? This is a pretty hardcore movie I would not recommend to someone that does not enjoy being scared. And it has a lot of really tough subjects, but it does feel similar to things like Midsommar and It Follows. I don't know.
I think one difference is that none of those are psychological horror.
You don't think Midsommar is psychological horror?
I mean, to a degree, I guess.
Hereditary.
I think of those as more folk horror. But I don't know. I'm not a labels person. Don't label your things.
Well, I guess that's the question. Is the label ever helpful? But it does fit. Categorization is helpful because it helps us notice things that are similar and notice things that are different. And so it lets us have conversations about things in groups instead of everything being on its own. But obviously, everything is unique and stands on its own.
Well, to me, it seems like elevated horror is a label that is like an umbrella term that could sort of cover several subgenres when we already have labels for the subgenres. So I don't know if it's necessary. And I do think that I think that's why some people hate the term elevated horror, and maybe why some people don't even like elevated horror movies, is that it does seem a bit pretentious to some people.
But then what's the B movie label?
I don't know that.
Because I love B movies.
Yeah. Well, I think
we love those.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Interesting. We don't answer questions on this podcast, folks. We just ask them.
Because to me, this is a psychological horror for the most part.
I think you could also make an argument that it's folk horror, just because the entity seems to me like a demon or interesting. I don't know. I'm going to leave it there. Do you have a favorite quote?
I think I wrote some down, but they're in my notebook, and I'm going to let you take it away on this one.
I think, okay, I've said a few. When the demon says, because your mind is so inviting, that kind of encompasses a lot of this. But I think I'm going to go with, she's going to die, I'm going to die, we're all going to die, nothing matters. And that's from Carl in the opening scene. So with all of that said, that is...
Well, did you have a favorite character?
Shoot. Yeah, favorite character. I didn't write that down.
I picked Joel.
I think that, yeah, I'm not sure.
Because he was equally caring.
Yes.
And interested.
Yes.
And maybe he was partially caring because he was interested, because you were talking about how he, like when she came to him for help, I mean, I think part of it was he was like, all right, let me take a look at this. And as soon as he saw that there was a little bit of a pattern, then all of a sudden his detective brain was like, all right, this is something juicy, because I would be like that. I'd be like, oh, we've got something here.
Yeah, no, that's a great call. I think I can't take Joel because you just did. I'm going to say her boss, Cal Penn. He was a really good boss and a good friend and a good doctor. And he tried really hard. And then he ripped his face off, which was really cool.
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 Does that mean it is time for the open mic night portion of our podcast?
Yes, it does mean that it is time for the open mic part of our podcast called Open Mic Night of the Living Dead.
I keep forgetting to spin our turn on mic sometimes, or flip our turn.
Oh, right. Let's do it. Let's see who goes first.
So call it in the air. Heads is the side of the guitar pick with the writing. Tails is the one without.
All right.
Flipping.
Definitely heads. Is it smiling at you?
It's heads.
Ooh, that means...
You can pick.
You go first.
All right, I will go first.
Awesome.
Let's get set up, and we'll meet you back here on the other side. Ladies and gents,
We proudly present, for your listening delight, this week's Open Mic.
All right. I've drawn, well, Rachel made me go first. Here I am. This is my song inspired by Smile, and our gimmick this week was no names, which basically means we can't directly reference the film, or at least that's how I interpret it. And slowly but surely, this is becoming one of my favorite songwriting gimmicks, and I'm not entirely sure why, because the whole point of the gimmicks is to sort of give us some sort of boundary within which to work, and I usually find that really helpful. But aside from freestyle, really no names is kind of as free as it gets. But so far, I've really, really enjoyed it. And when I was first imagining my song for this, I was like kind of picturing maybe electric guitar, something. I kind of wanted to be inspired by the sound design and the music in the film that we talked about. But it didn't turn out that way. It just turned into a folk song. And I've come to learn that my finger picking skills are not what they once were. So I'm just going to suck it up, because at this point, my left hand fingers hurt so much from working on this, mostly because I'm getting old and weak. All of that aside, this was No Names, but whenever I start writing the lyrics in my phone, it always starts out as movie title song. So it goes in as Smile Song, and then usually whatever the title becomes, I change it. I think I'm just going to keep this called Smile Song. Or it could be called Hanging On, but I like Smile Song better. And I have no expectation that my finger picking will be good. Again, the cracks are forming. It came without a warning. I thought I left it all back in the past, but it snuck right up on me like it never left at all. And now it's like I've been under attack. So it will haunt me, and it is daunting as I become my thoughts. Please excuse me, right now I'm losing as I become my thoughts. Will it last as long as last time? Will it keep me up the whole night? A shadow in the corner keeping watch. It won't ask for my forgiveness. It doesn't care that I am in this. It's broken off the key inside the lock. It will haunt me, and it is daunting as I become my thoughts. So please excuse me, right now I'm losing as I become my thoughts. It takes more than a couple deep breaths to get me out of my head. It's never done but easier said when I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm hanging on. So it will haunt me, and it is daunting as I become my thoughts. And please excuse me, right now I'm losing, but maybe someday the wise will come across. Again the cracks are forming.
So first of all, there should be a meme for like, oh, I'm so bad at this, and look at how bad I am at this, and then do beautiful finger picking. There, that's the meme for you, whatever that is. Your finger picking was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
And I really liked it, and it's so just so good. You had some great lines in there. The one about wires crossing, and then easier. It was a transposition of easier said than done. It's done easier than said, maybe, or.
It's never done, but easier said.
Yeah, you flip that around from the usual, like just a lot of really beautiful choices in that song. And it's funny, and we can talk about this after I play my song, but for a movie that inspires such dread, I think both of us have made songs that are actually quite pleasant to listen to. So that's kind of interesting that's where we both landed. I really like that song. It was really pretty. And I love the tag on the end and kind of the like fading into quietness that you chose to end that with.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. You're good at this.
Once in a while, I do okay.
Yeah. Self-deprecation will get you nowhere.
That's not true. Have you seen the internet?
Touché, sir. Shall we set up for my song?
Sounds good.
Okie dokie. Okay, so for my song, I mentioned the conversation I had way back when I was a student pastor, I think, about why people with a lot of trauma end up in helping professions. And so that was kind of the idea that I had bouncing around in my head as I was working on the song. And so this is called The Scene, and it taps into that a little bit, that idea about returning to the scene of the accident so that we can try and fix it. But yeah, this is my song inspired by Smile. Around and around I go, wonder if I'll ever know the reason why I keep on coming back to the scene, far away from my dream. Somehow I always seem to find myself back here. But this time I'll change. Yeah, this time I'll save myself on the way to something new, something I've never seen. I've been down this road before. I've opened up every door. Still the story always ends the same. Maybe if I can change the who, I can change the direction too. But it never works like I want it to. And I'm back on the scene, far away from my dream. Somehow I always seem to find myself back here. But this time I'll change. Yeah, this time I'll save someone else on the way to something new, something I've never seen. When will I learn that I've had my turn and nobody can change the past? But maybe my story, in all of its glory, can change someone's future path. Away from the scene, that back towards their dreams. Though I always seem to find myself back here. This time I'll change. Yeah, this time I'll save someone else on their way to something new, something we've never seen.
Woo!
Little hiccup in the transition from the bridge to the last verse, but overall, I feel pretty good about that one. About the performance, I should say.
Yeah, very nice.
And the song, too.
Yeah, sometimes you perform, then afterwards you break the keyboard over your knee.
I do on
We've
occasion.
gone through at least 7 keyboards.
7 keyboards. That's what they call me. Keyboard Destroyer, KD for short.
Yeah, no, I think you encapsulated that theme very well, which is, one that we mention a couple of times as we've been going along through this movie. And it's definitely an interesting concept that I think holds true very strongly in the real world. Like probably one of the most interesting themes, I think, for me.
Yeah, and it's funny because as much as this movie is a very scary movie with lots of intensity, as we discussed it and as I was working on the song, I did find myself thinking about things that, I don't know, like it's very disconnected from the movie. Like the movie, when I think about it, I'm like, fear makes me feel strange, don't like it, uncomfortable. But like, I really like this song and I love the fact that it was inspired by this movie, even though, the movie has all sorts of other themes. And actually, even if we don't turn this one into a demo, I would like to take just this track and send it to my mentor, just because he is the one who kind of described that for me, 20 years ago or something when I was young and dumb and didn't understand anything. And so I think I'd like to send this to him, but a shout out to Peter. Yeah, I think that this was a pretty successful week, I think, for such a heavy film. We came up with some really pretty songs.
And I think you actually really like this movie. But
I
anyway,
think you might be right.
I think we're losing light, so let's wrap this up.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
This was a lot of fun, as always.
I mean, I don't know if I'd call this movie fun, but hanging out with you and talking about movies is my favorite thing to do.
I think this movie's fun, but I'm a weirdo. But we're losing light.
Yeah, we are.
Which means it's time to wrap all of this business up. And I think our first order of business is to spin the wheel of horror to randomly select the next film we will be covering.
Yes.
Oh, before we do that, I had an idea that I haven't actually talked to you about off mic. So if you hate this idea, then maybe I'll just cut this out.
Okay, great.
But I think for July, so Jaws was on our original wheel of horror.
Yes.
And then when it became sort of non-Jaws season, I took it off the wheel. I don't know if you even remember that.
I don't.
Because it created like an extra space. And I said that when the season came along, I'd add it back to the wheel.
Oh, cool.
But I love Jaws so much. I want to have a reason to watch it. I want to have a reason for us to cover it. I think it is going to be a double episode.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think we should do it in July because that's like Shark Month or whatever.
Okay.
So that will be a non-random episode.
Dig it. I like that.
So coming up in July, it sounds like we'll be doing Jaws.
Okay.
But for now, we must spin the wheel.
We must, because it's not July yet.
So here are the options. This is what we might spin. Nightmare on Elm Street, Pieces, The Strangers, Sleepaway Camp, Carrie, Audition, A Quiet Place, Alien, Weapons, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Child's Play, 30 Days of Night, It Follows. And of course, we have the ever elusive sequel, which if we spin that, we will spin another wheel to determine what sequel to what movies we've already covered we'll be watching.
Yes.
All right. Here we go. Turning up my volume so you can hear it spinning. What will it be? A Quiet Place.
Oh, come on. There's all this. Fine. My nervous system loves it. Bring it on.
And let me spin our wheel of gimmicks. Obviously, this week we had no names for our songwriting sort of guardrails. And all right, let's spin it. All right, we've had this one before, flashback only.
Okay.
You remember that?
Something about the past?
And I think we just have to interpret it as we...
I mean, I think that's fair with A Quiet Place. I think we could come up with something good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. By the way, A Quiet Place, 20th film.
Nice.
We're hitting some milestones.
All right. Well, we'll see how we interpret that for A Quiet Place. And as always, you can find us on the internet at yoursocialmedias.com. No, don't go there. We are OMNLD Pod for Open Mic Night of the Living Dead podcast, wherever you socialize on the interwebs.
Yeah, we're pretty active on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, but we're also on X and Blue Sky, getting into some conversations. And you can find me on Letterboxd, Chill Out Barbara. You can see my fantastic film reviews if you're interested there. But would love to see you guys. Send us messages, comment, etc. And please send this to someone you know who loves horror and or original music and or the combination or creepy movies.
And next week will be an encore episode. I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. Maybe curse horror, maybe, potentially.
Could do.
We'll see what happens, but we'll see you back for that, and we'll have a full studio demo of one of those 2 songs you heard today.
Amazing. Thank you for hanging out, audience, and you, husband. Thanks.
Yes, until then, keep watching horror movies.
All right. See ya.
Bye.